Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. Recognize that Prime Minister Mark Carney and his Liberal government are already running for re-election right now. It is what purely motivates pieces of legislation like Bill C-5, the Major Projects Act. They don't actually want to get anything done, they just want Canadians to perceive that they want to get stuff done in order to keep more moderate voters voting Liberal. I think that they actually didn't expect the Conservatives to vote for it. I think they wanted Bill C-5 to get defeated in the House of Commons by a combination of the NDP, the Bloc Québécois, and the Conservatives. So then Mark Carney could have gotten up and said, well, I was trying to save the economy. Well, I was trying to approve new mines, pipelines, and oil and gas projects, but it was those hypocritical Conservatives, New Democrats, and Québécois MPs that stopped me. And so now that the Conservatives have helped the Liberals pass this piece of legislation, which is bad, by the way, but not bad in the sense that it's like a censorship law. It's bad in the sense that it's a stupid law, and Cabinet could have always rushed projects through the regulatory process. And this was all just a way of Carney pretending to be more serious than he really is. Now Carney actually has to deliver because just today the Senate passed it, and now it is the law of the land. So Carney is now probably, in my opinion, going to go into political games mode in order so that he doesn't actually approve any pipelines, oil and gas projects, or mines, because he is walking a very thin political tightrope. And at the moment, it's probably working for him. There's a lot of people who think that he's this, fiscally conservative, but socially, more center left prime minister. The man is left. I think he is more politically pragmatic and he knows the sorts of things he has to say and do in order for people to at least vote for him, maybe not love him, but think that he's the right man for the job. And so, what he doesn't want to have to do is approve any oil and gas projects and lose the environmental portion of his party to the New Democrats. But he also doesn't want to make it seem like he is so beholden to those people that he has all the center right people who may have voted conservative go back over to the conservatives. So I want to break down some of the stuff going on with Bill C-5 here and the various sort of, I guess, pieces on the chessboard that Carney is moving around to, again, try and make it seem like he is the pro energy candidate. At the same time, he absolutely is trying to make sure that no project actually gets approved. But before I get into it, guys, I just want to remind you, if you like my political coverage, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you're not yet a subscriber. We're trying to get to 100,000 by mid-December of this year, and leave a comment on what you think about this whole, I guess, ordeal that we're probably going to go through. First off, I just want to quote from this article from the Western Standard. I will be linking it in the description below as well as pinned at the top of the comments. The writer of this article, I think, has done a very good job pointing out a major flaw with Bill C-5. Again, there are a lot of things salted within it to make sure that it never actually causes a project to get approved unless Carney actually likes it. So, green energy projects are going to be approved ASAP. Every wind farm, every solar installation that Carney is brought, he'll probably use Bill C-5 to rush it through the regulatory process. But if it's an energy project, if it's a mine, if it's a pipeline, if it's anything that is, something that an Albertan would actually like, suddenly things like this are going to start jumping in front of the expedited approval. So this writer here, who actually has a lot of experience in the oil and gas industry, I forget the guy's name, you'll have to go look at it afterwards, but great article. He says, but it is the reference to Section 35 of the Constitution Act, which deals with existing treaty rights for Indigenous people, that makes me think the bill is dead on arrival. And by the way, it also in the bill says it wants to basically hold to the standards of UNDRIP, which are even worse than the standards of Section 35. But the writer goes on to say, there are more than 30 years of Supreme Court rulings about Section 35 that have been completely ignored by Bill C-5. The issue addressed repeatedly by the Supreme Court was not the respecting of rights, but the adequacy of consultation. The court ruling bore down insistently on the specific issue of consultation and consistently ignored the hand-waving about respecting rights, e.g. Chippewas, all these other sorts of, I guarantee, all these other cases have gone on. The writer then says, having spent 5 years of my life on such consultation, I am not sure how the government will square the concept of urgently advancing projects with that consultation. Consultation takes time because the answer to legitimate questions often don't come until the final stages of the project's design. This legislation, as written, is begging for another slapdown from an appellate court. Unless, of course, Mr. Carney can successfully sell his vision to the 9 existing justices of the Supreme Court, but to even suggest such a thing is to invite the umbrage of the Chief Justice. So yes, what this piece of legislation has within it, saying it wants to get projects approved faster, is saying, but Indigenous banks can hold them up as long as possible. So how is this different than the current state of affairs? Plus, Bill C-69 isn't out of the way. Bill C-48 isn't out of the way. And now we have Premier David Eby saying, oh, of course I'm in favor of projects. He's not in favor of projects at all. His NDP government is very anti-oil and gas. But at the same time, he's smart enough to recognize that there is no chance that Mark Carney is going to get any of the federal regulations out of the way that are going to make these projects viable, because Eby is saying, I'm totally fine with projects as long as the private sector is supporting them, supporting these projects themselves. And as Peter McCaffrey points out here, Eby now says he's fine with a pipeline as long as it's privately funded rather than government subsidized. Great. But unless he also now supports repealing all the federal laws that make a privately funded pipeline impossible, this is meaningless. And that's exactly what's going on right now. Eby is basically talking out of both sides of his mouth the way that Mark Carney is. Oh, of course I'm in favor of a pipeline. Do you want to deregulate and lower taxes and get rid of the industrial carbon tax and move the consultations out of the way so we can actually start laying down the pipeline? No. Well, the private sector is going to have to deal with that, or it's not an economically viable project, even though no project could be economically viable with all the extra hoops the oil and gas companies have to jump through in order to get these things off the ground. You will have 5 major oil and gas companies all come together for projects like this, and even all 5 of them combined cannot put forward the money to actually get this project across the finish line with all of the hurdles in their way. It's not because the projects aren't viable, they are extremely viable. It's just that when you can always build a higher hurdle that somebody cannot cross unless they think these companies truly have unlimited money and they don't have a profit motive to work on. Here is then David Eby speaking on this just, I believe, yesterday, basically, again, trying to weasel out of the idea of actually having a new pipeline. So here, I'm just going to quickly jump over to this clip. Sorry about this, I'm fumbling a bit. Here's him addressing this topic.
Today, Premier Danielle Smith in Alberta said she believes she's 5 weeks away from finding a proponent to build a pipeline from Alberta to BC's coast. If she's able to find a proponent and that proponent pays for the pipeline in its entirety, would you support that bitumen pipeline going through British Columbia to a port in Prince Rupert?
Well, Richard, I guess some of my frustration about this issue is that there is no proponent. There is actually no project here. I went through a list that reflects probably in excess of $50 billion of investment in Canada and in our country, where there are proponents, where they are well through or on the verge of being complete through environmental assessment processes, where support from the federal government will benefit not just British Columbia, but also Alberta and the Yukon. And I think that's where our attention should be, on the shovel-ready projects that are ready to go.
Next, we'll head to the phone lines with Katie DeRosa from CBC.
You didn't answer Richard's question about whether you support a privately funded or entirely privately funded pipeline. Can you clarify your position on that?
Yeah, I did. I won't speculate. There is no project. There is no proponent. And as a premier of a province with literally almost $50 billion of projects with proponents that are ready to go, that are in approvals processes, that will benefit Alberta, the Yukon, and all Canadians, I strongly encourage the federal government to pay attention to those projects and help us deliver those projects that are ready to go.
And see, this is the Weasley move that he is pulling. The idea is that when he's asked, even hypothetically, if there's a project that is ready to go, would you say yes? And he's saying, well, there is no project. Well, there's no project because Your government, up until the last 5 seconds, has said no. And so he is preemptively saying no because they don't have a plan together. How am I supposed to approve something if there's no plan? So he's using this strategic ambiguity to prevent the oil and gas companies from even trying, because this guy is clearly not a stable partner. And uncertainty is terrible in private sector business, because you're not the government who can just tax people harder when a project's costs skyrocket because the people you're working with are impossible, and the BC government is impossible to work with. And this is what Mark Carney is going to also use in order to hold up projects. He has the consultation angle, he has the environmental assessment angle, and then he has the provincial government angle. I guarantee we're going to get into a stalemate here where Carney is saying, well, or EB saying, well, Carney won't back the project, and Carney's saying, well, I'm not going to back the project because EB's not backing the project, and both of them are just going to be using each other, passing each other off as the real one that's not getting the project approved. So Carney can always just say, well, the provincial government won't sign off on the project, that's why I'm not fast tracking it. And then the company won't put forward the money because it's not going to get fast tracked. So then EB can say, well, see, the company won't even propose something seriously, so I'm not going to say yes. This is a stupid political game. And again, from the liberal side of things, they are doing this for re-election. It is the appearance of seriousness without ever actually having to do something serious. And again, like EB was saying there, well, there's 50 other projects for me to approve, and I think we should start with those first, which may include some mines, but it's going to be green energy projects. It's going to be other big infrastructure projects that are obviously able to get funded because the government subsidizes them, because the government has been encouraging them. It's funny whenever I hear that something's economically unviable when it comes to mines or oil and gas projects or pipelines, when in fact it's the government who walks into the room, executes the project, and wonders why it's not moving. It's almost like the amount of taxes they pay, the amount of regulations they suffer under, make it so that it's difficult to do this for specifically only their industry. It's not hard to get approval for a green energy project, and you're going to get subsidized to do it too, and they buy your energy at a massive loss to taxpayers. It's nuts. I've talked to people who work in the energy trade in terms of like the actual buying and selling of energy onto grids and whatnot from the companies to the public. And while yes, wind and solar power are bought onto the grid technically at the same price that natural gas would be or coal was back in the day, that's not actually how it works. Yes, the actual unit of energy is bought at a flat rate for everybody. But do you know that wind companies and solar companies, that they actually get a specific amount of money for each unit of distance? I forget if it's meters or it's kilometers or whatever. For each unit of distance that they have to run a big copper wire from that installation to a power station, they get extra money. So green energy projects are incentivized to be as inefficient as possible so that they get to collect as much money as possible for the distance that they actually are moving the energy. That is why government sucks. You have projects which are set out to fail because they get more money to fail from the government. You can't make it up. This is why, in essence, you will have on a grid, I'm making up numbers here, but I'm just trying to give you guys like an idea. In Alberta, you'll have natural gas be bought onto the grid at 10 cents a megawatt. And then you will have like solar. So natural gas, 10 cents a megawatt. Solar will be bought at 40 cents a megawatt when you actually include the other costs on top of the flat rate 10% to buy it onto the grid. This is becoming a bit of a video about everything. But yes, I hate the regulatory systems of the government. And this is, again, what Carney is doing. He's not going to brush away all this nonsense out of the way of the oil and gas companies in order for them to actually be able to confidently put forward their money for a project. He is going to stay ambiguous so that if a project doesn't get approved, well, it's their fault. It's the oil and gas company's fault, or it's this indigenous group's fault, or it's this environmental group's fault, or the company just didn't have a good enough plan. Because he knows there's enough people out there who will say that because Bill C-5 exists, the Major Projects Act exists, he's serious about economic growth. And it must have been the company, because the media is going to back him up. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to work. I think there are a lot of voters who will catch on to the game, but at the very least, I'm relaying out the strategy to his game. Anyways, so that should be it for this video, guys. I will be probably covering Bill C-5 more in the future, whether projects get approved or not. And there is always a chance that he does approve some form of a project. I know Wab Canoe is in favor of a pipeline to the Hudson's Bay. At the end of the day, though, that guy is very much a reconciliation industry politician. And if Indigenous groups start to protest, he will do absolutely nothing to oppose them. There are just way too many ways of blocking projects, having different Indigenous groups in a concurrent fashion start to, or I think it's not concurrent, but the one after another thing. They can just keep challenging pipelines, and then one group can challenge it for a year, and then another group can challenge it for a year, and then an environmental group can take them to court. It's not going to end until the government stops it outright, and Bill C-5 does not do it. And it's good, again, that the Conservatives voted for it, because Mark Carney should have to fail on his own merits, not simply fail because the Conservatives wouldn't support him. He's gotten their support. Now he has to deliver. So anyways, that should be it for me today, guys. See you later.